Hello, everybody, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, I once more have my usual co-host on, Ian Simmons from Kickseat.com. Today, he has a very nice, fancy new blue microphone. I tried to use my usual lav, but it's not working with my fancy H6N. Oh yeah, you do have the H5, so we got to get you to use that. Um, so today, I know we talked, during this whole pandemic conversation that is going to go on for an indefinite amount of time. We brought up sort of, The Dark Knight Rises on your show as sort of a movie that doesn't directly relate to what's going on now, but I wanted to talk about something that relates to uh, the state's mental health, how America doesn't choose to acknowledge it, and how we seriously need mental health, and it's being looked over because of the absolute chaos that we're living in today. And one movie, as someone who's dealt with his own mental health, I wrote an article about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it talked about how it's a movie that's surprisingly relevant. It stands by today because it really is sort of an allegory, if you will, at least okay, whole healthcare system works and how it's actually continued on since the 1980s through Ronald Reagan, and I'll get a little more detail with that, how it's gotten worse. But um, have you had a chance to revisit? And I'm sporting my RP McMurphy look for the podcast with the leather jacket and the hat.
Oh yeah, it's
um,
I think if it were a jean jacket, it would be absolutely note perfect. But yeah, when the
yeah.
when the camera came on, I saw what you're doing. I was like, that's excellent. So yeah, um, but yeah, I watched Cuckoo's Nest for only the second time yesterday,
Mm.
and I hadn't seen it in it had probably been 25 years because it was one of my dad's favorite movies, and I remember watching it once with him and not really getting it. Um, and then I watched it yesterday, and then I read your piece, which was very well done and very personal. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this movie because my reaction to it now is different than I expected it to be. And I don't know if we're going to agree on everything today. So we'll see.
Right.
We'll
It
see.
seems to be a reoccurring theme where you're like, I didn't like it, but then I saw it and then I liked it,
Yeah,
which
well,
is good. You know, that you can never see a film like Kubrick said that you can never really watch a film once and then present a real objective viewpoint to it. You have to see a movie more than once. Although the first time I saw it, I think I enjoyed it quite a bit, and yeah, as the years go on, it really speaks to me, who struggled with his own mental health, especially now more than ever. How have you been doing recently with this series of events?
fine.
I feel. Please be honest, because I'll be.
No, I mean I've been fine. It's a weird state of affairs because, mostly with the news, it seems to be a different take every other day. Like, hey, we might get out of this soon to be the food banks are running out of food and, people are getting a little sketchy. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Just trying to keep busy and keep positive, and that's about it. I've got
yeah,
my moments like everybody else when you're just kind of staring off into the darkness, wondering what does it all mean. But yeah, overall doing all right.
yeah. That's good. I wish I could say the same. No, for
Uh,
me,
yeah,
yeah,
I was saying I understand. I'm
yeah,
this cheery optimist is I'm in the
yeah.
minority. I'm sure of opinions here, but yeah,
No, it's good to be optimistic. It's just for me, I just it's hard for me to do it. I mean, I've suffered with depression and anxiety disorder my whole life. I've recently started taking pills for bipolar disorder, and recently just trying to deal with everything has been horrific, to say the least. Um, I I mean, I remember I was calling my psychiatrist recently, and I told her is there someone I could talk to, a therapist? And she said, well, due to pandemic, she was Russian, by the way, you you cannot get in touch with anybody. And I thought that was kind of shocking. It's like, you could have at least given me the phone number to a therapist to talk to. And today, more than ever, it's important to have someone to talk to, because if we're going to be locked down for something that could be the trajectory of 18 months, not everything will be locked down then, but a majority of things will be that way until we return to some semblance of normal, with a new form of normal that's going to emerge. It's going to be incredibly difficult. Um, but I guess what I wrote my piece is that we do all now kind of live in an insane asylum. We're all locked up. We all uh, think we're going crazy, and when really a lot of us are not, as a matter of fact, insane. And even with the label as crazy, some people uh, can appear completely insane and normal, and outwardly, but inside it could be a completely different case. And I feel, especially now, there's a huge rise in suicide calls to the suicide hotline. And I mean, in New York, they would maybe get like 60 calls within a certain district a day, and now they're getting 1,000. And especially people can do. And when this relates to Cuckoo's Nest, it really is sort of a story that is about people who you generally assume in the beginning are insane, but then as the narrative continues on, you realize that they sort of submit themselves into the institution that they're based on, and they uh, basically become so comfortable with a system that abuses them that they want to stay there. And I think we're sort of in this mindset now that we're going to return to normal, that everything's going to be all right, and that we can go back to our lives. And we're not realizing that we have to restructure the American healthcare system, not in just terms of how we deal with physical health, but mental health as well. And when you watch that film and you see sort of the individual struggles that everyone goes through, whether it be McMurphy, whether it be Billy, whether it be uh, many of the other various characters. I particularly do think of Billy because he's this young guy who basically is in prison because his mother is such close friends with Nurse Ratched, who quite literally plays the devil in that movie, especially with her hair, how it forms up like little devil horns. That we are sort of, our country's institutionalizing ourselves, and I think it's a great film that's a call to action to transform the way things are, and it's certainly a fascinating piece for me.
And that was the biggest surprise to me watching Cuckoo's Nest, because Nurse Ratched, as played, incredibly by Louise Fletcher,
Yeah.
has been she's an iconic, I guess, pop cultural villain. Not so much anymore, I think, because the movie it's 45 years old this year.
Mm-hmm.
So as the decades wear on, it's not necessarily as relevant as when it was, being parodied on The Simpsons or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, she's got this kind of reputation as being this, evil character. And watching it yesterday, I failed to see it.
Mm.
I don't consider Nurse Ratched to be a villain. I consider her to be, and it's very interesting, the point about being friends with Babbitt, Billy's mom. I didn't see that as a problem. I saw it as, she struck me as someone who is legitimately concerned, probably got into this business wanting to legitimately help people, but she's older. She's probably in her 40s, because I think that's Louise Fletcher was 41 when she did this movie. So we can assume she's got a couple decades under her belt. She's partnered with a young nurse who, the actress was 21 when she did this movie. So it's sort of this contrast of like the young, wide-eyed nurse who already sitting in these group therapy sessions, you can see this look of, it's either sort of horror or just detachment, on her face as she's watching these guys talk about their lives or not talk about their lives and have these crazy, pardon the expression, outbursts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we only get, what amounts to a few scenes spread out over a couple of months, in the McMurphy saga, as it were. They've been dealing with it for however many years they've been on the
Mm-hmm.
ward. So I see, and there is a point at which, McMurphy his case is being discussed with the hospital administrators, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, this guy isn't crazy. He just, he's trying to get out of, prison and work detail. So he's committing himself essentially here, saying he's crazy. We have to evaluate it. We're not buying it. We're going to ship him back to prison. And Ratchet steps in, says, what does she say? I wrote it down here somewhere, but
Oh, when they were talking about sending McMurphy back to prison, she basically says, "I think that would be a disservice to him, and I actually want to help him out because I think we can help him."
yes,
Essentially, yeah.
yeah. You paraphrasing the quote wonderfully. I just can't find it in my chicken scratch. But so
Okay.
what I see there is someone who does not, she might not like him, but I think she also sees that he is a troubled individual that maybe she can possibly reach, but he
Yeah.
is so acerbic and wild and distrustful and hateful towards her because of what he sees her as
Hmm.
representing. I don't think she is the devil. I think McMurphy sees her as that because she is a challenge institutionally to his whims, which
Yeah.
I'm fine with because if everybody was running around like Jack McMurphy, we'd be living in Game of Thrones all over again. Institutions exist for a reason.
Yeah. There's certainly two perspectives you can take with that. I know Ken Kesey, the author of the novel, absolutely hated this film. Like, he even tried to sue the filmmakers, uh, I guess, for making the film. And I guess he stumbled upon it like in a hotel room one day, and he didn't know where it was, and he noticed what it was. And he was like, ah, and he switched it off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I did you
But
ever read? Did you read the book?
no, but I do know that I think if I did read the book, I probably wouldn't like the movie. One of those it's sort of like Flowers for Algernon is my favorite book, but I hated Charlie. Or they didn't hate it, but God, they butchered the hell out of that novel, and I would love to see. Well, now it feels like that movie wouldn't be that important anymore, but a modern rendition of it. But with Nurse Ratched, it's certainly the way Louise Fletcher played the role was she didn't want to outwardly play the character as this villainous devil, and she wanted to play it from an empathetic angle, or a sympathetic one, I should say. And when she does try to, in my mind, pretend to be sympathetic, it makes her all the more horrid. Because you see people who pretend that they care for you, but really they don't. You're just a paycheck for them. She's sort of the epitome of, and I like the note you wrote where she came in wanting to help people, but throughout the years, I think she uh, grew bitter towards her position. So she sort of used it as a means to have power over these people in this institution. So when she does her group therapy sessions with them, for instance, she is turning them against each other as they're having their outbursts, and she pretends that she isn't pleased what's going on in these sessions, but at the same time, she's able to control her power dynamic over them. And in my mind, I think that she is someone who sort of to turn towards the dark side in a way, who originally had good intentions.
Well,
And it could be interpreted in multiple ways because we don't know. It does kind of leave it. I mean, I don't think for Milos Forman or for Lawrence, I don't know how to say his name, Hobbin or B. Goldman, who wrote the film, they thought, oh well, she's someone who might be good. They kind of unequivocally said, oh no, she's bad. But it's an interesting take to think maybe she does want to help them, but she doesn't know how to.
well, I guess my question to you is, what are you basing your assumptions on? I mean, did the filmmaker say that she was a villain? Because watching it, I went in expecting, because I think I misremembered her as an evil character from when I first
Mm.
watched the movie, and I was like 15, 16 years old. So a lot of the thing just kind of flew right over my head, or the cuckoo's nest, as it were. But watching it now, I was struck by how, whatever, this pop culture understanding of her character has been, I didn't see any evidence of it. I
Mm.
mean, like none. So when you're saying that you've got this perception of her, I guess, is that based on, and this is not, as no offense, but sort of
No,
projecting onto
personal
this
experience.
character's film,
Yeah.
right? Or something that you're actually seeing that I didn't. So I'm curious to have that conversation.
It's a little bit of both, and I'm glad you bring that up. Yes, a little bit of it is from personal experiences. The psychiatrist I'm seeing now. First time I saw her, uh, she said, "Do you have problem with weight?" I said, "Why is that?" She goes, "I have eyes." So
Oh
yeah,
no.
so
So
you
well,
work
let
with
me ask you about
people.
this, because
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't want to derail thing, but I
no,
remember you wrote about this scene. When I'm going to call it a scene, the episode with your psychiatrist
yeah,
and the pills in your piece, and it was very striking. Um, and I don't know how any of this works, so pardon my
yeah,
naivete,
no,
but I'm just going to ask, like, so the first time you saw your psychiatrist, she
yeah.
made that kind of crack about your weight. What leverage do you have as the patient to say, um, thank you, I'm going to ask to see someone else? Do you go back to a healthcare network? Do you go to, what institution can you go to even lodge a complaint about this person?
I'm very glad that you asked that. You you know what? If they're not in your network, yeah, it's very hard to find someone who is in my network, who could essentially help me. In Chicago, you can't find anyone, and if you want to find someone where you're not paying through the nose to see them, they have to be there. So you can complain, but nobody's gonna care. Nobody's gonna do anything. So in the case of Nurse Ratchet, for instance, when McMurphy's sitting there, and yes, he is outwardly antagonizing her for his own entertainment in a way. He still had a point where he began to subconsciously care for the patients around him. And when he was complaining to the staff of the film, one of which I'm trying to remember the doctor's name in my head who he was talking to, but he was actually a real life doctor in the Ohio State Mental Institute that they were filming in.
Hmm.
Um, and essentially, we could complain about her, but it doesn't matter. She's hired by the state. They're not going to get rid of her. And you do deal with. I've dealt with some people who were wonderful and genuinely cared for you, but you also have a lot of people who I think become disillusioned, who become bitter, who say, I did this many years of school. I don't care anymore. And maybe they think they care, but they don't. And I think Nurse Ratchet, on that personal level for me, seemed that way. She pretends that she has sympathy for these patients, but really she doesn't. The other reason why I think that she's sort of a villain is because in the original novel, from what I understood, even from what the author himself said, she was a villain. And in all the behind the scenes videos, they talk about her being a villain and how Louise Fletcher wanted to portray her in a more sympathetic angle.
Well, I mean, I got to call you on that, because I don't think that
Yeah,
counts. I mean, if something is in the book, but it
yeah,
doesn't make it to the movie, I mean, that doesn't, because there are going to be people watching this who, aside from seeing that it was based on a Ken Kesey novel during the credits, they're not going to say, "Oh shit, I got to pause this and go back and read the book and watch the movie." They're going to watch the movie as its own thing. And Louise Fletcher's interpretation, if she said she's going to play this as a sympathetic character, then automatically that character is no longer a villain. Because if she's playing it with a way the audience is going to see her
hmm
as sympathetic, and that's her goal as an actress, then unless she's doing this like 4D chess kind of a thing where she's going to play her as sympathetic, even though the script blatantly points out evil things that she does, that doesn't really work. I see her as not a compromised character, although I do, because you keep going back to this idea of she thinks she's doing good or she cares, but she really doesn't. Again, I see that as a viewer interpretation. A lot of what she doesn't seem to relish, except when occasionally when she wins against McMurphy, but that's only because my interpretation, just putting it out there, if she does not win against him, then that cliche about the inmates running the asylum comes closer to a reality. She
Mm-hmm.
has to uphold the policies of the institution. They have rules because it's not like a classroom where you got the occasional unruly student. These are adults
Yeah.
who some of them are in there because they've been, prone to violence, and they are sedated with drugs to help keep those impulses under control, whatever you might think about that. She can't buckle. She has to be, the drill sergeant, like in, Full Metal Jacket. You got to take these misfits and shape them into something that are going to allow the fabric of this institution to survive.
Right. Um, the thing is, even the filmmakers themselves, Milos Forman said she's a villain,
Well,
and even
that's fine, but
Louise
watching
Louise
it.
Fletcher herself even said that she isn't morally a good person, but she tried to make her something that the audience wouldn't want to basically vomit, instantly when seeing her
Well,
on screen.
and I understand that, but I'm saying
Yeah,
as a viewer,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
free from context of like,
Of all the
I've like,
other
right.
stuff, yeah.
Again, I've heard that she's a villain, but I've never heard specifically what she does in the movie that's villainous. It's not like I've heard for decades, oh, she's villainous because, she strapped the electrodes to this guy's head and, and shocked him for no reason, or
Yeah.
she deprived these people of their lunch for 6 days. I think a lot of this, I feel like it gets wrapped up in the mental health institution stories from the
Hmm.
40s that sort of inspired at least this film, and I'm not sure about the novel, but it was a big scandal about, you'd see people lying in their own filth and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But Nurse Ratched, she's a supposedly terrible character who every day gets up, goes to work, administers medicine, and sits down and has group therapy chats with these people who, until McMurphy comes in and sort of like injects himself into the situation. And, he does do some good in getting people talking, but they're having these same disjointed conversations every day. It's hard to get people to speak. She could very well be the taskmaster and say, I'm going to deprive you of food until you tell me your life story, or, break out the fire hoses. But she doesn't do that. So all I'm doing is looking for evidence, unbiased evidence in the performance. I
Right.
don't I don't care what Milos Forman says. If he meant for her to be a villain, in my opinion, he was unsuccessful in that endeavor.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting interpretation. I think it's something where you have to read between the lines when you see her on screen, and everyone's going to have their image of her. The majority doesn't see her as a good person, but it's good to see that you saw something else in her. I'm sure Louise Fletcher would be very happy with that because she wanted people uh, to actually not be so adherent towards that character. And for me, I'm glad that you saw some form of empathy in it. Obviously, I have my own bias, but at the same time, uh, I feel like everyone who thinks they're doing good, I don't think there's anyone who's just outwardly evil in real life. They all think that they're just, from the goodest person in the world to the most sickening individual. Uh, and what dictates between good or bad is entirely up to the viewer. I don't think she consciously wants to hurt these patients, but inside she does because she knows she doesn't really have anything outside that world. But again, that's reading between the lines. What you're seeing on screen just plainly, if you're not looking between the lines, you're not, seeing her, you know, you know, leaving patients in their filth or electroshock therapying them. Yeah, she seems like she cares and she's trying to keep the place from falling completely apart and sees McMurphy as a threat and even gives him a chance, even when he takes over the mental institution and has everyone drinking and partying and just basically destroying the place. So I do see that sort of understanding for her character.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like what the lines are that you're reading between,
Yeah.
because by that logic, you can take the most beloved character like Forrest Gump and say, but what was he really thinking? I know he never did anything to harm anybody, but deep down inside, he really hated Jenny, and that's why he was trying to get a relationship with her and control her and get her off drugs. That was his way of being ultra conservative. I mean, it's just that kind of thing. Like, you can say that about literally any character. I'm just looking for evidence within the movie to even suggest that,
Okay. Well, for evidence, let's say when they're doing the group therapy sessions, does she really try to help anyone? Or does she try to put people on the spot when they're uncomfortable and they don't want to answer a question, yet she continues to persist?
well, but there is something to be said for, and that is a method of therapy, is getting people to confront and to not just be able to crawl back into their rooms. I mean, she did bring up a good point about when she was confronted, like, why are the rooms locked? You know, after we wake up in the morning, she said, well, you can't just go back and lay in your bed all day, because I don't remember what the exact quote was, but it was about the dangers of solitude and, group being amongst people is, therapeutic. And, there is something to be said for that. And her method of having people sit in a group and confront their issues together, that is it's not something she invented, right?
Yeah.
It was something that the hospital obviously believed in and endorsed. Whether or not it was right or wrong or what the results were, she can't necessarily be held responsible for her patients, inattentiveness or not wanting to do it. And on top of that, if most of the people, let's say all of the people in that group of 9 were there voluntarily, they submitted themselves to whatever program it was. They signed themselves in. They possibly read some kind of a waiver or something saying you're going to be subjected to these conditions. This is what this means. So they were caught to a certain extent in their own mental prisons and unable or unwilling to face the world outside. But in doing so, they have to take responsibility for the fact that, okay, if you're going to give up your freedom willingly to be in this institution, here's what that means. So if you got a problem with it, then sign yourself out and go back to the street. But if not, we're going to be here to try and help you the best we can. And again, if that's not good enough, there's other places you can go.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a fair point. It's just she didn't seem to do anything to really help anyone. If they really want to talk to someone, talk to them one on one. Actually try to get to know them as a person rather than kind of creating this angry mob that was around them.
That's a fair point. I don't know.
And then using Billy's mom sort of as a weapon against him when he was sleeping with Candy. She said, "I'm going to have to tell your mother about this." She knew she didn't have to say that. She knew that that would trigger him, but she wanted to make him feel bad in front of everybody, and she didn't have to turn to the camera and say, "I want him to feel bad."
Well,
You
no,
can see.
that's the thing is when that issue came up, I was thinking, I don't know that she was taking particular relish in having to talk to the mother. It seemed like she was trying to shame him for what he had done, because what he had done was, it could be considered shameful, or at the very least dangerous. Being with this woman. I don't know how old Billy was supposed to be. If he's 18 or if he's 23. I mean, Brad Dourif
Yeah.
was very young when he did this, but it is possible that she, if the mom inquires, like, how is Billy doing? I don't know. Maybe there's a patient confidentiality thing. She certainly probably isn't going to be able to lie, especially if they are friends. So she's caught in a bad spot.
Yeah.
It is the most problematic, I think, exchange that she has, and the best evidence that there is something else going on with Nurse Ratched. But by the time we get to that point, she's just had it with everybody. She's given them nothing but trust, and she's tried to help them. And at the first sign of things breaking down, they go and have this drunken, debaucherous party, which to her mind probably undermines all of the work that she thought, all the progress she thought was being made, and creates this ripple of distrust. So I can see at this point her seeing those patients as being villainous and unworthy
Yeah.
of her devotion.
But if she knew that Billy was suicidal, even if she snapped, that's
I
just
I
something
don't.
that you can't do.
Was there any indication that Billy was suicidal? He
Well,
wasn't
why?
in a he wasn't in a special
The guy's
ward.
18 years old. He serves all the time. He obviously does have the ability to go and socialize, but he's afraid because Nurse Ratched wants to keep him afraid. And that relationship with his mother shows that even before they talk about it. When he's talking about the girl that he proposed to,
Hmm.
and then she says, "Well, that's a lie, and you know it," and she's saying it in front of everybody. Just from a pure therapeutic perspective, you'd never do that in a million years.
Well,
Yeah,
again, I don't know that that's
yeah,
the case. Now, I don't know much about therapy, but I
yeah,
have seen in other movies and TV shows this
yeah,
tactic used. I mean, what good is it to allow someone to be in a group setting and openly lie to the person who's administering therapy and the other people to paint themselves in a better light than is the truth? And
yeah,
by saying, that's a lie, and he's like, oh, well, I guess I can't get away with that. What does it mean that I'm trying to lie? What am I trying to cover up? And
yeah,
getting that out is therapeutic, right?
yeah. But
So,
openly roasting them isn't.
but she wasn't roasting him. She just said, you're lying. She didn't say, that's a lie, Billy, and you know it, and you should be ashamed of yourself and all that. She
Well,
just
she
said,
didn't have
that's
to
a
say it
lie.
that way, but
Right. But
essentially,
she did say, what is she going to do? She's gonna be like, well, Billy, I don't know if that's exactly the truth. She's fed up at this point with all these people,
yeah,
right? She's just going to call them on their nonsense because, soft pedaling, it doesn't work because these people are, whether they're clinically insane or just insufferable and they've gone to this place because they can't handle the outside world. There's nothing wrong with cutting through the bullshit. As far as him being suicidal, there is no indication, as he is no less outwardly unstable than any of the other people in that ward. In fact, it could be argued that he is one of the more stable people, given some of the behavior and outbursts that we see. So when
hmm
he slices his neck open, that is, it's a surprise to everybody, even the nurse. I mean, it's not like they're like, okay, if he was a real suicide case, they wouldn't have just said, okay, orderlies, take him, whatever. They would have, I assume, strapped him down or restrained him somehow and not let him go unsupervised and grab that glass, because we see him go off screen with, in the arms of two people. And then 2 minutes later, the young nurse comes in splattered in blood. So at some point, the orderlies left him somewhere, which I don't know if that's a continuity problem or if there's something from the book. But as an audience member, I'm like, what's going on there? I certainly didn't think that meant that he was, there was a suicide problem beforehand.
right. Well, I think to your point, as you were saying a little earlier, she's fed up with the job, and you
Mhm.
you could just tell that's why she's getting short with these patients. And when she's fed up with it, she doesn't care anymore. You know.
I disagree with that. I think you can be fed up with something and still care. Again, when I say fed up, I'm talking about, she's possibly reached the point where a lot of people who are in the mental health industry reach after being in the job for 2 decades, which is
Yeah.
kind of, I can't remember what the comic book is or the movie, but it's like all it takes is one bad day. Maybe it's The Dark Knight or
That
something.
was I have that book actually. Where where is it? It's The Killing Joke. Oh yeah, here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I was on the right
this one.
track with the Joker. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but
life. But yeah.
but it's that idea that she was putting up with as much as she could and still doing her
Yeah.
job. Then you've got R.P. McMurphy coming in, who was such a human tornado. I mean, we haven't really talked about Nicholson's performance, but
Right.
the idea that anybody could really withstand that guy,
Oh my
I could
god,
see
yeah.
I could see her getting fed up with him specifically and what he is bringing out of the other patients. She still, it could be argues, cares. I mean, at the end, after she is nearly killed, I don't know how she's still alive after, he's choking her, ramming her head against the floor, digging his fingers into her,
Yeah.
into her throat.
Her
But
eyes like nearly popping out.
bugging
Yeah.
out, she's turning purple. The next time we see her, she's in a neck brace. She's leaning over, smiling, like welcoming someone into the thing.
Yeah.
A villain would have either quit, I think, or the next time we see her, she would be like saying, turn the hoses on them, or that's it, no food for a week, that kind of a thing. I don't see villainous behavior in this character.
I think that would have been, but that's what makes it so good is that she's not outwardly villainous because most screenwriters would have probably done that. And I think in the book, from what I understand, she appeared more villainous where
But
she did
again,
stuff like that.
that's the thing. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about the book, and the book does not
Oh no,
count in
no,
this
I'm not talking
case.
about it either. I'm not talking about the book either. I'm just saying that the movie tried to balance the line whether she was outwardly villainous or not. And I think most people's interpretation was, ugh, when they see her. Um, but it's good that you saw the good in her. That's beautiful, man.
I'm a
And then
big
she
Luke
did have
Skywalker
that.
fan.
She did have that upstairs area with all the people with lobotomies too, which was sort of the straight indicator. Oh, this is what she's capable of. I know McMurphy nearly tried to kill her and everything, but I think at that point when she nearly died from that patient, instead of throwing him in jail, she's like, no, I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going
But
to
it's not.
have your brain out and
But it's
shove it
not clear
upstairs.
that she even had the authority to order something like that. I mean,
I,
she's the head nurse on the floor. I don't know that she can sign the paperwork to have someone lobotomized.
well, I don't think she had to. They had to have a scene where she had a line saying "lobotomy him," but you get that she did that.
I
I don't
don't.
think
I
it
did
doesn't
not
have to
get
be
that.
verbalized on camera,
No,
but
I
uh,
didn't get that because that the Murphy's actions
yeah,
on the ward, that would have reached all the way up. We see the panel of doctors a couple of times talking about this. This would have been their decision. Nurse
yeah.
Ratchet can make recommendations, but she's not calling the shots,
I
right?
think their
It's
their
possible that they
decision.
would have discussed lobotomy and maybe she
Yeah,
chimed in and said, sure, but she's not, well, she had a mustache. She's not twirling her mustache and saying, do this. I want it done now. That is something that's left ambiguous, but looking at this just from an institutional, I keep using that word, but let's say a
yeah,
corporate situation, she's a
yeah,
middle manager at best. She's not throwing
yeah.
those levers.
Well, I don't think that they specifically looked at the hierarchy of the institutionalized system in that sort of manner. I think, at that point, if it were up to the staff, as they said they wanted to throw him in jail earlier, they'd say, yeah, throw him in jail. Like, he had a shot. He killed her. He's done. But yeah, it's open for interpretation whether she decided to lobotomize him or not. Anyways, let's get to Nicholson's R.P. McMurphy. I, I mean, as you could tell from my piece, for those who want to read it, you guys won't. But
No, they should, because it's an
yeah, I'm kidding. It's a
excellent piece
joke.
of writing.
It's a
Yeah.
joke. I always like to say, nobody gives a shit. They're not gonna see. I always say that as a joke, because everyone wants you to smash that subscribe button. But
That too.
yes,
Subscribe and read the piece.
yes, exactly. Smash, smash, smash. Okay, had to get it out. I mean, I liked how at first when you see McMurphy, you think this guy's a fucking prick, you know? Like he just goes around, he's bully. He seems like the high school bully who's
Yeah.
going around, he's picking on everyone, being like, "Oh, look at this guy. You like to look at people's cards, huh? You just smile, dumb dumb. Yeah. Oh, look at this, hard on. That's what he keeps calling. Isn't that what Hardy? It was his name Hardy, and he just called him hard
Uh,
on. I just
Harding.
Harding. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's why I called him hard on. I just got that. I did. I can't believe I just got that.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Um, which I mean, he kind of was a hard on. He wouldn't shut up about his wife. Talk about that's a guy who really, I think. Anyways, I'll get into that later. But yeah, at first you kind of are disgusted by this guy. Especially the whole thing when he sees the chief and he's going, oh, that's like, wow, what a racist dick. But the thing, and of course the statutory rape thing,
Hmm.
which oh,
When
that
he's
was one.
describing that 15-year-old girl's vagina to the head admitting doctor. Yes. Wow.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Think of like all this. See, but that guy acted like a real doctor because he was one. When he said that, Nurse Ratched would look disgusted. But then again, from a woman's perspective, you would be, but you had to be objective. So that'd be tougher. The male doctor was kind of smiles like, yeah, that's but he's probably thinking like, you sick motherfucker.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well,
uh,
it's funny because there were that was one of two allusions to The Shining that I saw. This is 5 years before that, but there's that interview scene, Jack Nicholson going in to
Yeah.
talk to the person who's about to lock him up for, 6 months.
Yeah.
And then, of course, at the end, you got Scatman Crothers coming in as the night attendant.
There's a funny thing about Scatman there. I don't know the third film they worked on, but Nicholson said to Scatman, I'm going to put you in 3 films. And then the 3 films were Cuckoo's Nest, turned out to be a classic. Shining turned out to be the classic. And the third one, I don't know. But yeah, that was, man, Scatman Crothers' character was a moron. What an irresponsible idiot. God, and that's one flaw I'd say with that movie. Like, that guy is supposed to be security watch, but then he's like rubbing the $10 bill against his fingers, and he's saying, "Well, I got some girls here who want to come up." He's like, "You're getting closer, brother." Like, sorry for my racist voice, but
That sounds more like Hulk Hogan than Scatman Crothers, but it's okay.
come on, brother. Yeah. Hulk's racist. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's he was it was awfully convenient, although I could have seen a version of this scene going where the inmates didn't all go crazy and lose control. I could have seen this working out because McMurphy presents himself as a rogue. He doesn't have any outward, mental instability like some of the other patients on the block. So, and he's also very charismatic. He's very cool. So I could see him, in confidence, saying to the guy, I got these girls out here. They can bring in some booze. We're gonna have a little party. You can get on this too. Here's some money. And the guy's like, fine, what's going to happen? But of course, they arouse the suspicion of everybody else. And the gremlins come out to play and things get out of hand. So yeah, he does not make good decisions, but there is a version of this third act that I could see working in his favor.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, anyone who is a responsible guard, I think, would say, no, they can't come in. We can't. Like, he had his superior come in earlier.
Sure.
When all the
Yeah.
guys are in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but with McMurphy, my point was, at first you hate him, but then you begin to like him because he sees how everyone is sort of being controlled by Ratchet, by the institution. And of course, as later he finds out, they have the decision to, leave at their own will, at least the majority of them. He sort of wants to show them a life of opportunity, a life of freedom. And in a way, he does kind of become friends with them, especially in the end when he's saying goodbye to everybody and, shaking their hands and all that. He sort of becomes sort of the embodiment of someone who truly cares for you. And the person who cares for you sometimes is the person who you don't think would. It's the person who you think at first is deplorable, who makes fun of you, who gives you a hard time, who has done awful things. But then as you get to know them, you find out, just as he got to know these patients, that they're not crazy and he's not really a bad person. He does bad things, abhorrent things that is unforgivable. I mean, bragging about a 15-year-old girl's vagina is disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
But you find out that in the end he's not, and this is controversial to say this in 2020, but whatever, the world's gonna end anyways, so who cares? That he isn't that. He cares for these people on a much deeper level than the institution did, and he sort of gave them the freedom to be who they want to be. I mean, Billy would have never had sex with Candy and lose his virginity and become a man if McMurphy didn't go out of his way to offer him that chance. I mean, McMurphy, if he didn't care for these guys, he would have taken those keys. He would have went right out that window, and he said, "We're not going to have a party." But he decides to have a party and to show everyone a good time before he leaves. And to that, he's one of the sweetest characters I think I've ever seen on screen.
I'm going to push back on that and say that I think that he is an irredeemable scumbag. I think there's evidence throughout the film to back that up. Look, again, he's charismatic. A lot of this comes down to Nicholson's performance. But if we're going to
Hmm.
talk about Scatman Crothers' irresponsibility as the guard, or the night watchman, let's talk about McMurphy sneaking out, stealing a bus, and taking a group of 8 other mentally ill patients out to a boat and sailing around, catching fish. Sure, that's a cute little montage, especially with Vincent Scavelli doing the hooking the fish and then poking out the eye and putting it back in. That's a great
Oh
little
yeah,
detail, right? But he doesn't know these people.
yeah,
He hasn't been around them that long. Yes, they're voluntarily in there, but any one of them could have been, psychotic, on the verge of murder. Let's assume that Billy is suicidal. What if he had decided to jump over the edge of the boat? So it's reckless. His idea of, throwing a party at the end, yeah, it gets out of control. He hadn't expected, much like Scatman Crothers,
yeah.
to have a party. But when he did realize that everybody else on the floor was coming after the booze, he did nothing to break it up. He just watched in this kind of detached amusement. All these people are there from the beginning of the film to the end of the film for his kind of sick amusement. And he's only in it for himself. I think that he is able to relate to people because it's kind of insinuated that he, on the outside was, I guess, charismatic enough to seduce a 15-year-old girl, apparently willingly. But he
Doesn't
also
take
had
much
it.
for them to do that.
Well, but I mean, he was a 35-year-old man, so
Yeah.
I can only speculate
Uh,
how consensual that was. But also, he got into 5 fights for which he was arrested. How many other fights for which he wasn't arrested? I picture him as sort of a Bukowski character,
mhm,
but with minus the terrible complexion.
mhm,
So yeah, he's dangerous. I did not. I was conflicted watching this movie because again, this is an iconic Jack Nicholson role, and
mhm.
it's a masterful role, and it's completely abhorrent to me as a viewer. I'm like, I don't find this charming or cool. I think it's dangerous and irresponsible, and that's one of the reasons I was really hooked in and watching Louise Fletcher's reaction as Nurse Ratched to this guy because I'm thinking, does she do anything that I myself would not have done in this situation? And the answer is no. In order to deal with someone this extreme, you have to bring every bit of institutional power to bear so that that problem does not end up in a floor, and the gremlins coming out.
Mm.
That's where I stand.
I'd just throw him in jail. Like, that would
But
just be a lot easier.
but let's talk about because we kind of opened this discussion talking about the Reagan 80s and the complex history of
Hmm.
federal institutions being shut down and people being shut out on the street. The same thing happened with prisons. Prisoners being released and prisons
Absolutely.
themselves being these kind of crock pots for
Yeah.
mentally ill people. I don't know what you get by sending him back to jail. Is he just going to
Yeah.
kill someone or get knifed because he picks a fight with the wrong person? There are no easy answers. I don't know that this movie is interested in those answers.
Well, the that's the good thing about it not having easy answers is that it makes you examine and make the assumption of what you would do,
Yeah,
and your perception of Ratchet. Uh, because I mean, for me, I'd honestly, I think as even doctors have to have a certain limit in where they can help somebody, and I think within the limits of McMurphy, I would instantly just say, you know what, we did what we could. This guy is clearly out of control. He deserves to be in a prison. Whatever happens there happens there, and I can't. It's out of my hands. I can't deal with it. Just like when we deal with any sort of project where something is out of your control and it's too overwhelming, you have to sort of toss it aside and say, okay, let someone else take care of it. But the thing with McMurphy that I liked is, yeah, on the outwardly he seems just like this horrible, deplorable maniac. Uh, when he's gleefully watching everyone drink at that institution, he's happy because they're happy because they're having a good time. If it were up to, uh, I think someone who didn't give a shit about these guys, he just would have left the place and that would have been it. As you could see, he was so when he's doing the group therapy session and he finds out that everybody is willfully institutionalized, you could see his heart break through Nicholson's face on that screen. When he turns to Billy and he says, you should be going around in a car getting birds. Like he's heartbroken that this kid's life is being thrown in the garbage, and he wants to show these guys a good time when he's taking them fishing. Like, was it a good morally right thing to steal a bus and have a bunch of people who could go around and possibly kill like everyone fly around? No, but he's not a good person. He's a bad guy, but at the same time he's not a bad guy, and humans are not good people. We like to act like we're holier than thou, but we do horrible unspeakable things. It's just that we don't talk about them. And the things that McMurphy did, we're seeing front. He's not lying about the scumbag that he is, but in the end, he's just truly helping people.
Well, for a couple of things to unpack there. One, yes, humans as a species have done unspeakable things. I think it's a harder case to argue that we are bad or rotten, because we've also done a lot more, I would argue, good things.
Well, I
As
didn't say
evidence,
we're rotten. I said that I don't mean to cut you off. We're not that we're rotten, but we have elements to ourselves, our own skeletons in the closet that McMurphy is willing to outwardly expose.
some people, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there are different degrees of badness and goodness in people. So, but that's just you could say that about any. Well, I guess we're the only that we are aware of sentient species. But there's no such thing as a perfect person, just as
Mm-hmm.
there's no such thing as an irredeemable, necessarily evil person, possibly up to a point.
Except for
Um,
Donald Trump.
well, your hero, Mr. McMurphy, also
I actually
grabbed
do have
someone
it.
grabbed someone by
Actually,
the
if I
pussy.
did make
So
a movie, I did have one. He did, but he also didn't let thousands of people die. But if he was
when is this?
president, who knows?
You're talking about
Uh,
you're talking about the COVID crisis?
yeah, yeah,
Because he didn't do anything. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. He decided to go golfing. Anyways, that's something else.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that is another thing that is up for discussion. But I would like to point out that he did form a COVID-19 task force in late January, right before he instituted the travel ban, which he got immediately harangued for as being racist, and for which Dr. Fauci said weeks later probably saved thousands of lives.
Right.
So let's just call the balance sheet even for now and move
Yeah,
on.
let's not go into politics. Yes, starting down $200 million CDC office. No, no, no. But I will say that there
Restructuring, I would say
there
restructuring.
is there is, even with Donald Trump, there is a sympathetic angle you could take with his father, who never really truly loved him, and he really never truly learned the value of love or anything outside of material value in his life, and that's why he is the way he is, and
Well,
he
but
wasn't
you
born.
don't know him. You
Yeah,
don't know him. That's speculation. That's projection.
yeah.
You've never talked to the man.
But that is a sympathetic angle.
It is. It's a sympathetic angle tinged with an opinion that is unfounded.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, we'll leave it at that because we're going a little too off the rails
Sure.
with that. Yeah. Uh, but McMurphy, I don't know if he's irredeemable. You know, like humanity, he's flawed, but in the end, ultimately, he's good.
I don't see the goodness though. That's
Mm-hmm.
the thing. I don't see anything that he, much like with Nurse Ratched, I'm looking for evidence in the film of good things that he does. He does things which in a different context could be seen as helpful, but in the way that he goes about it is extremely unhelpful and dangerous and ultimately selfish.
Mm-hmm.
He could have snuck out and, possibly he goes out on that fishing trip, not because he wants to take them out on a field trip. It's because he wants to escape. And the only way he can do that is to get on the bus, which is going, out of town so he can steal it. Right.
Or perhaps it was both.
Right. But he can't just walk out, through the gates of the building. Right.
No, gotta get
He's
Chief's help.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the sink. But no, but here's the thing, going back to the whole party aspect of it, with the drinking and that last or the second to last scene, if he really cared about those people and if he had been able to think outside of himself, you make the point that yeah, he could have just left, but that would not have been helpful, true, but would have been more helpful is once he realized the situation was getting out of control, put himself at risk by going
Mm,
to the people who were on staff, the authorities, and saying, hey, look, all the inmates are getting into a bunch of booze. you know, yes, I started it, but you got to get down here before something goes horribly wrong. Instead,
yeah.
what he did was he coerced Candy into having sex with this kid, Billy, who, again, he doesn't know if he's in there because he's got a problem with women, i.e., that problem is he has molested people or sexually assaulted them. He could be the awkward guy that we've seen in movies before where he gets with a girl and maybe she laughs at him or giggles at him the wrong way and he starts beating her or killing her. We don't know any of
Yeah.
that context. He's
Yeah.
presented as this sweet, innocent kid,
Hmm.
but he's in this institution. I'm not trying to say that there is anything wrong with him, but we're not given information to think that there is nothing wrong with him outside of having a stuttering problem.
Right. Well, I would say McMurphy's a good person, but he's not a smart person. So he made a dumb decision out of wanting to make other people happy. And who's to say we haven't made dumb decisions to make ourselves happy or to make others happy? Who's to say that even the stupid beach bros over in Florida are irredeemable, terrible people who thought they were killing people? They just thought, you know what? I just want to have a good time. And yes, there is an element of selfishness
Yeah.
to McMurphy's actions. He could have easily gone to the staff, but if he went to the staff, not only would he get in trouble, he'd get everyone else probably in trouble as well. You know,
However, Billy may still have been alive.
yeah, he may have been, but nobody could have predicted that would happen. Even Nurse Ratched, who
Which is
did end up,
exactly why what
yeah,
he did was very irresponsible throughout this entire movie.
oh
And one
yeah,
thing I don't want to let go is you brought up McMurphy's first reaction to Chief with the hooting and hollering and doing the
oh,
stereotypical
hang on,
Indians. Oh,
yeah,
so his first reaction to Chief was to do the hooting and hollering kind of stereotypical Indian
yeah,
stuff. Um, the movie, and I was very surprised at this, but
yeah,
when Chief goes in and puts the pillow over McMurphy's face and kills him, we
yeah,
get and I'm not on my musical instruments, but we get the kind of stereotypical Native American kind of like lutes and chirping sounds
yes,
over the
yes,
soundtrack.
yes.
I'm like, what the hell are you trying to say?
I
The
did
movie
have a
is almost
problem with
making that
that.
point that Murphy was doing is like the only characteristic this guy has is he's Native American.
Yes, I did have a problem with that too. Actually, it is set to the tune of the song "Set Me Free," uh, but yeah, it's like okay, we know. I guess because the book was based on Chief, but that's too much of a deep cut for the audience to get. And secondly, I wish they didn't go with the Chief's theme because we know in the end the Chief is the one who pretended he was crazy but really wasn't, and he was also the one who was outwardly a criminal, although I think he killed his father because his father was an abusive alcoholic, from what I recall him confessing to Murphy. Um, but the movie does kind of make you question if Murphy's crazy or not. And the movie also kind of, I guess, in a way, confirms in the end that probably McMurphy was crazy and Chief was the actual criminal, but he was the one who was set free in the end, and he gave everyone the inspiration to do that, which is why they set the Native American instruments towards him. But I agree, they didn't need to implement that. It's like in case you forgot he's Indian. Woo, woo, woo. Like,
Yeah.
oy vey, yeah. But yeah, do you think McMurphy might have been crazy, or do you think he was just an asshole?
I think it was just an asshole because I mean, and again, I'm not a psychologist or a
Yeah,
psychiatrist. I get most of my knowledge from movies, but one of
yeah,
the things that I understand, perhaps incorrectly, is that if you're insane, one of the characteristics is you don't know you're insane. There may be people who have psychopathy, or there might be sociopaths who understand that they have a problem. They just are incapable of giving a shit.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that manifests in certain ways. Some people just kind of are buttoned up and they don't care about people. Others, are just aggressive and, see the world as a sandbox that they
yeah,
get to play in. But I don't think he was crazy. And that was the big debate.
yeah.
The reason they locked him up and observed him was like, no, he's not, shitting himself and,
Well, I
wondering
mean,
if he's a seagull.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, right.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, he's looking for a way out. And his reaction to, you know, Billy and all the other people finding out that they were in there voluntarily, I
Yeah.
don't know that was necessarily empathy. I thought he's like, that's crazy. Like, you guys, should be out there. Why would you want to be in this place? That's just he couldn't understand.
I think he thought it was crazy because he felt so bad that they were there, or it could have just been what the fuck, man. But you don't
I'd
know.
go with option B. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I don't know. It is. I can't tell if he was crazy or not because obviously his intention to go to the mental institution in the first place was to get out of the jail. It was get out of jail free card. And of course, when he finds out when he's in the pool through the security guard that, oh no, they're gonna keep you here. They don't let you go. That's when he realized, oh shit, I'm actually stuck here. And that's when I think no, I don't think he's crazy. I think the institution drove him crazy. If it didn't drive him crazy, he wouldn't have tried to help out all those guys in that place.
Well, again, we're getting back to a debate of whether or not he was helping them out,
Yeah.
whether either deliberately or accidentally. I don't think the institution drove him crazy. I think what happened was he came face to face with the consequences of the actions. And he
Mhm.
didn't like it, so he just kind of acted out like a child. He
Mhm.
was kind of freewheeling and carefree. I've got this whole thing rigged and gamed when they're like, no, now you can't leave. He was like, well, what the fuck? I mean, that's what happens when you break the rules. And that might not be cool or hip, but
Yeah.
again, that's one of the things that keeps us from living Game of Thrones. You were frozen
Um,
for a second. You're back.
oh yeah, you were frozen too.
All
Or
right.
that's one of the things. Yeah, and then, yeah.
Oh,
It's
so I was saying that's one of
technology.
the things that keeps us from living in Game of Thrones is having rules.
I
Unfortunately,
haven't seen Game of Thrones, so I
I've
saw the
seen
first
I've
episode.
seen I've seen bits.
Yeah, I guess like everyone's competing for the throne and goes some teenage kid or something. But
But
yeah,
the idea of like pretty much like lawlessness and rape and murder and
yeah,
everything kind of up for grabs societally. We've come a long way, baby, as they say.
yeah,
And unfortunately, that means that some people who really want to express their ultimate freedom can't for the
yeah.
protection and betterment of others.
Well, yes, that is sort of McMurphy's playground to do horrible things. Except in the end, what it does isn't so horrible. He shows these men an opportunity to find a bit of happiness in their current situation, and
Yeah, I
if
agree, and that's what I was getting at earlier. I think accidentally kind of does help them, through that fishing trip.
mm-hmm.
Who's to say? I know back in 1989, I think Michael Keaton was in that movie, The Dream Team, where he
uh,
was kind of that same. It was like the overt comedy version of this movie,
uh,
um, where he's taking them on outings or something. Remember very little about that movie, but I could just imagine there might be advanced therapies in the intervening decades of having people in a controlled situation go out and experience things. If Nurse Ratched or the institution had been aware enough or not scared enough of taking those chances, maybe that would have been a new thing that they could have tried that would have made some differences other than what they were what they were seeing that wasn't working, obviously.
yeah. Um, so, do you feel like this movie, in a way, might be a allegory for the broken mental health care system at the time, or because I know I was telling someone about that, and they're like, "No, you're completely reaching,
I
with your own bias."
I would say that it's a reach.
Yeah,
It's easy to look back on it through a 2020 lens and draw those parallels, but what you have to realize is the national conversation about
Mm-hmm.
healthcare or mental health care was
Mm-hmm.
not. It was mostly, from what I've seen, like localized to the California issue with Reagan at this time as governor, and some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that he had tried to do. In 1980 is when Jimmy Carter passed that
The Mental
healthcare
Health Systems Act, which, yeah,
right, which Reagan, when he came in, he got elected in 80, came in 81, and
yeah.
immediately kind of undid that. But what
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing is a movie that came out 5 years before that national conversation got off the ground.
Yeah, well, that was the thing is I think people were talking about it back then, but it was something that people were suffering with. People who weren't mentally well were institutionalized, maybe some who could have gotten better but didn't get the help they needed, and it was a conversation that opened up that I would say not through 2020 lens, not through uh, 2010 lens or a 1990 lens, but through a lens before that movie and after that movie. It's timeless regarding how we are being failed. When they talk about medication time, like, yeah, I did kind of see that as an allegory for it. And it could have been a reach, but I did see that as an allegory for you take your medicine, you shut up, you don't worry about your problems. Medicine will fix everything. It'll be fine, you know?
Well,
And
I gotta disagree there because they did have the group therapy thing. They didn't just give them medicine and then have them go back to their cells so they'd be quiet and out of space or out of mind. They were passing out the medications that each person needed. It's kind of like saying, we were talking about your antidepressant medication
yeah,
or whatever it is that you were prescribed and you were
yeah.
having some difficulty getting that, having to go through your psychiatrist. If your psychiatrist had said, no, you don't get your medication, that would have put you up shit creek, I am assuming, to some
Mm-hmm.
degree,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you don't need medication. These people obviously needed medication. Now, if there'd been some kind of a subplot about how they're all being given the same thing or it's just to dull their senses so we don't have to talk to them, maybe you got a case there. But again, based on what the movie is giving us, it's something that is necessary, that is a gateway to get them to be calm enough in order to have a group setting conversation where they can talk out their problems. It's like establishing a baseline.
Yeah, you broke up a little there, but I think I got most of the point. Yes, it is something to keep them in line, and yes, they have the group therapy, but yet everything kind of goes through this continuous cycle. They play the same music on the little record player whenever they take their medicine, dun, 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 and and they're banned from seeing the World Series, even when they have a majority vote to see it. You know, I thought that was a beautiful moment for McMurphy right there. Um, and everything is done by this very strict, simple routine that isn't concerned with the individual patients, but is more concerned with kind of creating a structure, a system, for a society that works. And then when someone rattles that system, unconscious to what their actual goal is, uh, you see how that infrastructure is disturbed in a way that isn't really meant to help people, but just to generate a sense of normality and comfort that isn't beneficial to those who are actually sick. And
Well,
it's through the mise en scène of the film, through the usage of that music that's continually used, through those reaction shots where you're seeing everyone react in a certain way, where where Milos Forman has the camera on someone's face for so long, you want to see the pain, the disillusionment, the discomfort that they have, and how nothing is working for them.
well, I mean that is one way of looking at it from a filmmaking standpoint. I agree, but as far as the group therapy aspect of it and the sort of one size fits all solution, the other side to that is they're working with what they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you were to throw billions and billions of dollars at the healthcare problem and say what these folks need is individualized care. Let's say you
Mm-hmm.
have a million this is a way low number, I'm assuming, but let's say you have 1 million mentally ill people who all need individual therapy programs. What you need then is 1 million therapists who are qualified to handle these cases. But we're
Mhm.
not talking about that. We're talking about, let's say, 30 million or 50 million. Are there 50 million therapists who are going to be paid by what, state and federal institutions to do this? And what's the success rate? Also, it's not just this one person that you're going to be like, here's my personal therapist who's going to help me for the next 10, 15 years.
Mhm.
You're also going to have new crops of patients every year, every 6 months, every 3 months popping up, and it becomes an exponential problem. So what you have to have are, again, institutional solutions that sort of have to wrap everything up, because otherwise
Mhm.
it's going to collapse.
Yeah. And
It's not perfect. I'm not saying I'm
it's no,
advocating for it.
no,
I'm saying that's part of the problem.
no, I'm actually kind of absorbing what you're saying and understanding it. Um, yeah, unfortunately, in a way, how we kind of have to deal with herd immunity with the coronavirus, we have to, in a way, sometimes you can't help everyone. You just can create a system that can help them to a certain extent. Uh, I think the point of the movie was that the system wasn't doing enough, perhaps with individualized care, which had its own angle.
Yeah.
Um, as time moves on, I think relating to that film standpoint, there could be more effort put into these institutions. I mean, therapy is so damned expensive that nobody can get it when they really need it. And I know, like, I had to pay so much money for therapy myself, and therapy is something that also is viewed as taboo and cliche in society. If someone says, "I want to go see my therapist," they go, "Oh, you must be, there must be something wrong with you."
Yeah.
And I mean, the reason I wrote this piece and I'm being so open about myself now is because I feel like after this horrible pandemic happens, I think we will have a more empathetic society that is going to look out for each other, because we have to. Doesn't change until catastrophe happens or until there's a violent revolution. Not that I'm advocating that in any sort of way. Um, but through a movie like this, I want people to who maybe have struggled like I have, or who maybe see something in this film, who don't struggle with it, can understand. This thing was broken back then, and people still are not getting help now. And it could be financially because they can't afford it, or it could be emotionally, where you have therapists who are just overbooked, especially now,
Yeah.
and they have to do these Skype sessions with patients because they don't want their patients to kill them, inadvertently. Um, I think that the overarching point of the movie, beyond solutions that you and I can adjust, because we aren't in charge of the logistics of fixing such a system, but we can only come from the standpoint of the individual who is being forgotten about, much like how the government just sends a $1,200 stimulus check, like, oh, this will get you through for a month, good luck,
Yeah.
while the rest of the world is, if you look at Europe, they're covering people for basically a year, which is what we need. uh, if we can have massive societal change towards that, towards our physical healthcare system, I feel Cuckoo's Nest is a representation of how a mental health care system that was broken then is even more broken now. And when, I hopefully 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, it can be fixed where people who really aren't ill but are treated as ill, and people who are ill who aren't being treated for being ill, especially during these times where suicide rates will go up, where when people lose everything, they will snap. Where there will be massive riots and fires in the street. I'm gonna guess, months from now. We had to figure out a way where we could treat people mentally, and I think it's important to open up a discussion for mental health now, and important to see how that movie addresses mental health, uh, back then, and how even today it cared so much more for people who were mentally unwell than something like Joker did, where although I liked it, it still felt like, what else can we add? He laughs uncontrollably. He doesn't know how to talk to women. He's obsessed with his mom, which is like apparently every Walking Phoenix role, And this is a movie that looks at people who are mentally unwell, and it doesn't see them as dangerous. One person who's dangerous is a person who is okay, presumably mentally, but the people who aren't, uh, instead of getting help and living a life that could be wonderful, are left behind.
Yeah.
That was sort of my rant.
No, it's a very hopeful rant, if there is such a thing. Yeah, one thing I hope that comes out of this is, pre-COVID, a lot of people I think were, this is part of the social media age that we're living in. They're very much locked down in their own bubbles.
Yeah.
Reading the same stuff, talking to the same people, not really engaged in the outside world. But now the outside world has, to a large extent, been taken away from us.
Yeah.
Once this thing opens back up, and I've heard the 18 months thing. I don't know if that's true or sustainable. I believe that we're going to be getting back to work, or, opening things back up much sooner, because, as has been said, the cure cannot be worse than the disease. You want to talk about complete societal collapse, 18 months, the world will be over by that point.
Yeah.
However, I would like to think, and maybe this is just the optimist in me, once people can walk outside, it's kind of like the end of Jojo Rabbit, when she walks outside after having hid in that closet from the Nazis for however many years. It's just seeing people and hugging, and I don't know when we'll be able to hug again, but at least high fives and just human contact once again. I hope that it does create a backlash against this insular society that we've created for ourselves with social media, and get back to something that's actually more social. And maybe that's how we get the building blocks for more empathy, more care that we need to give to people, more outreach, and change some of our policies and business practices and whatever else needs, so that people who need the help get the help they need. And again, not just from writing prescriptions or writing people off.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that I don't when I say 18 months, I don't mean like everything is going to be in complete lockdown for 18 months.
Yeah.
What I mean is you'll have restaurants open up, but everything will be like half capacity.
Yeah.
People will have to be 6 feet apart. Not the people eating at the table who know each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, and even with the resurgence of the disease, sometimes it's like they said, herd immunity. I mean, for me mentally, when I was listening to an episode of Pod Save America, because I'm a fucking lefty piece of shit. No, I get it. But I was listening to an episode of Pod Save America, and they had this doctor on, highly qualified, but he said this thing that I just thought was the most selfish thing imaginable. He said, "What the person interviewing him said, we hear we're going to be locked down for 18 months. Like, how do you think Americans will respond to that?" And he said, "Well, it is going to be 18 months, and we just have to learn not to be so selfish, and to hunker down, because your grandma, your grandpa's going to die. If you go, if you go out." And it's just a new way of life. It's like, yeah, but guess what? If nobody's making any money, they're going to die in the street anyways.
Right.
And people will go insane. And when they go insane, people are going to start. I think there were like scenes in Contagion where people are starting to loot stores and things of that nature. And it's like, that's what's going to happen next. And it's going to get really bad. And we want to prevent that.
Yeah, that doctor's interview, and I didn't listen to it, I'm just going based on what you said.
Yeah.
That response is a late March 2020 response to a question that we're talking about 2021. I understand what he meant by that selfish comment. He's talking about the Florida kids who are out, if I get COVID, I get COVID or whatever. And, and he got it, right? And then he came out and apologized. We still see people, unfortunately, we tried it, right? We tried saying, hey, everybody stay inside, in Chicago. And weeks went by, the weather got nice, people are going out to parks, they're biking, they're congregating, and then Lori Lightfoot has to step in and says, look, motherfuckers, now we have to close the beaches and the parks. We got cops stationed everywhere, because
Yeah.
folks just don't get it. That's what I believe he's talking about in terms of being selfish. But that is also very present day, and not thinking about, a year and a half from now, it's not going to be a matter of selfish. It's a matter of A, people going stir crazy, perhaps literally, and B, depending what the supply chains look like, not being able to actually provide for themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's horribly insensitive. I don't know if he misspoke or if he just wasn't thinking about what he's saying, but that's irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of the general consensus from the medical community, that they're saying, well, you know what, it's either you die or you don't have a job and you can get your job back. I'm like, well, I won't have a job if I'm living in the fucking streets,
Right.
and homelessness is something that Reagan created when he shut down Carter's Healthcare Act. All of it's in my piece. Please read. And if we become homeless, we're gonna die. And it's like I'm starting, like I literally have had like a few episodes already, and a lot more people are going to, and it's something that we really need to think about our mental well-being, because I mean the therapists who are talking to people right now are talking to therapists because their patients need therapists.
Yeah.
And God, imagine the suicide hotlines, you know. So there was a woman calling a hotline, and she said, "I went to a store and I hugged my daughter, and I'm worried I might kill her because I hugged her, and because my daughter was scared, she was crying, and she had to tell her, well, you comforted your daughter. That was the right thing to do." But it's like, how long can a parent comfort their family before before they don't know what to say to
Yeah.
their kids? Before like we can't console with the people we love, and then they can't get the help that they need, and then either suicide goes up or we starve, or what have you.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the best we can do right now is just do the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, which is take it one day at a time
Yeah.
and do the best we can and continue to reach out. And, I got to go in a couple of minutes, but I just do want to say
Yeah.
that, whatever you need, if you ever need to talk,
Yeah.
I'm always a Skype or a text away. And
You don't want to talk to me when I'm on an episode, unless you want to hear me screaming incessantly and crying. Yeah.
talk to me, call me up before you get to that point, and we'll see what we can do.
No, no, you don't want to. But no, again, I wouldn't kill myself. I wouldn't do that just because I wouldn't want my parents to live with that.
Well,
Um,
it's not even a matter of something as extreme as that. It's a matter
yeah,
of, people sound so cheesy, but people need people. And,
yeah,
sometimes you just need to really talk to somebody and reach out. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And in the end, in Cuckoo's Nest, they could talk to McMurphy. You know, he
Yeah,
cared for them. He was a bully asshole, but he actually listened to them. Maybe not for hard on. That guy complained about his wife so much. Wasn't a Christopher Lloyd's character who goes, "Every day you're talking about your wife, blah blah blah." Yeah.
well,
But
right, but that's not necessarily what he needed. I mean, that's a level of insensitivity that
hmm
Nurse Ratched was at least trying to get him to talk about,
yeah. See,
right?
that's what I thought. I thought she was being insensitive in those sessions, but I could see where the oh god, a lot of people a lot of therapists are gonna turn it to Nurse Ratched. That's what's gonna happen.
Well,
Yeah, but no, I think on that hopeful note, I want to thank you for coming on. Of course, you can check out Ian Simmons at kickseat.com. You've been incredibly supportive of me, and I really do want to thank you. Like you've helped me a lot in my career with trying to be a critic. Hopefully, we can still have movie theaters after this.
yeah.
Uh, God, yeah, because what's the value in it if you're watching it on an early screener? But no, thank you so much for everything you've done for me, and I like having these conversations. I don't want to just agree with everyone. I know it's called You'll Probably Agree. I should have probably called the show You'll Probably Not Agree. Whatever. Too late. Um,
Well, I will say thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
always fun. I love talking to you about movies and life and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So yeah, anytime, man.
Okay. All right. Love you, brother. We'll
Love you
I'll
too.
talk. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. That's not politically
Wow.
correct. All right.
All right, man. Take it easy.
All right. All right. You have a good one. All
All
right.
right, you
Thank you
too.
everybody for watching. Please subscribe on YouTube to YPA Reviews. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, everything on YPA. Come on, you guys. YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. So you can listen to this if you're in the car. Or you can, watch our beautiful faces and my ridiculous looking McMurphy jacket and hat on YouTube. Okay, thanks so much, guys.
All
All
right.
right.
See ya.
Bye.